Welcome to WGLT and WCBU Election 2020 coverage. I'm Dina Vollmer. Throughout the campaign season, we're conducting interviews and forums with the candidates in various races. Today, we talk to the people running for state representative in the 88th House District, which covers Morton, Washington, parts in Bloomington, and much of rural Tazewell and McLean counties. Videos of these interviews will be online as well. The candidates will have a 2-minute opening statement and equal time to answer questions. As moderator, I will call on candidates to make clarifying comments and may pose follow-up questions as well. In the case of a simple clarification, there will be no need for equal time. We will start with an opening statement from We will start with an opening statement from Democrat Karla Bailey-Smith, who won the random selection, followed by Republican incumbent Keith Sommer and Libertarian Ken Allison.
Hi. Thank you, Dana. I'm Karla Bailey-Smith, and I spent my college years in Central Illinois and returned to Bloomington in 2010 to raise my son here. I'm a small business owner, an artist, and an advocate. I have been advocating for LGBTQ rights since the 1990s, for gun safety, especially after Sandy Hook, and more recently for the Clean Energy Jobs Act, for ending cash bail, and for passing the Fair Tax Amendment. We are still reeling from the budget impasse during the Rauner administration, and I support the fair tax because it will help working families. I decided to run for this office when I attended a legislative breakfast and realized that every single one of our state representatives and senators for McLean County is a white Republican man. We need more moms in Springfield, more people who are relatable and visibly active and doing work in our community. As a voter and a constituent, I want a representative who is available and ready to listen with empathy to our needs and to fight for the policies and resources that will improve our lives. As a candidate, I have been working hard to be prepared to do this job so that I will be ready to serve the people of this district. I'm already reaching out and listening to what people want and need from their state government.
We'll move next to Republican Keith Sommer. Keith, whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Dana. I'm State Representative Keith Sommer. I'd like to tell you a bit about myself, for those of you who don't know me well. My formal education includes a BA degree in government from the University of Virginia and a year of study at the University of Bordeaux. I've had work experience at federal, state, county, and local levels of government. By profession, I am a real estate broker. I am proud of my record in Springfield on two fronts. Firstly, I have a flawless record of voting against bloated budgets, burdensome tax increases, and never-ending state spending and borrowing. I fight regulation that infringes on the constitutional rights of our citizens, support our free enterprise system, and demand an equal voice for the citizens I represent. I'm also widely known as a champion for children's and family causes and a leader on legislation that improves the adoption processes and bills that assist dyslexic children. My leadership assignments include being Republican spokesman on both the Adoption and Child Welfare Committee and the International Trade and Commerce Committee. I am seeking re-election to continue working on these issues, as well as those that address government ethics, redistricting reform, economic growth, small business opportunities, and giving our children the full measure of education they deserve. I am fiscally responsible, family-focused, and a firm advocate for small government. That's a bit about me. I look forward to sharing thoughts with you about the challenges we face as a state and how we can together turn these challenges into opportunities for the benefit of all.
And Libertarian Ken Allison.
Hi, Dana. First off, I just want to say thank you to everybody for inviting me here today. I'm going to start off actually asking a few questions of you, and maybe for the rest of the folks that are going to be listening. How comfortable are you? How are your friends and family doing? How are your children doing? I can tell you for all the people that I've talked to, there's a common answer, and that is purely uncomfortable. And the reason why is that there is absolutely no trust and there's absolutely no transparency. The elected officials we have in office have no clue what it is to be a selfless servant. There is corruption and self-dealing at every level of our governance. The two opposing candidates will offer nothing new necessary to change the course that we are headed down. The Democratic Party is running a roughshod over the state, and the Republican Party has simply no answer to combat it. What is left is a population that is grossly underserved, and I plan to change that. I demand transparency, and I plan to earn your trust. Once you get to know me and my work ethic, you too will see that we have an opportunity here for real change by electing a proven leader with a solid resume. Let me just remind you, I'm a 27-and-a-half-year retired military. I did 3 combat tours to Afghanistan. I did 2003, 2004, and then again in 2015. I'm a certified public accountant, so I understand dollars and cents with over 20 years experience. I'm a small business owner and entrepreneur. I'm a school board member. I'm also on the not-for-profit board member. The last question I really have to ask is, can anyone really be objective? Can you look at the content of who I am as a human as well as my track record and at least realize that I am exponentially more qualified than either of the other 2 candidates? Because if you can be objective, you'll realize that I'm really, truthfully, the only option. I am the safe bet, and I'm certainly the most conservative choice.
You're listening to an 88th District State House Candidate Forum. This is 89.1 FM WGLT and WGLT.org and 89.9 WCBU and WCBU.org. I'm Dina Vollmer. As agreed upon, each candidate will have up to 90 seconds to answer questions. On the ballot this fall is a proposed constitutional amendment to create a progressive income tax structure for the state of Illinois to replace the flat tax currently in place. We'll start with Representative Keith Sommer, who was second in line for the answering. Tell us why you are for or against the amendment and what passage would do for or to the state.
I do not support the graduated income tax amendment. I believe that a graduated income tax will drive entrepreneurs, investors, and middle-class workers from Illinois. A new tax structure does nothing to address our issues. It only gives the same legislators who increased spending by an additional 6% for fiscal year 2021 another vehicle to add to the tax burden of our citizens. And the proposed amendment would only give 10% of the tax proceeds to paying down the state pension debt. Where would the other 90% go? We are not being told. Tens of thousands of family farmers and small businesses who cannot move out of the state would see their taxes greatly raised in this time of economic stress. And just yesterday, a top administrative official said that if the graduated tax were not passed, then perhaps a larger tax would be imposed upon all the individuals of Illinois. I am disappointed at that discourse and am opposed to the graduated income tax.
We move next to Libertarian Ken Allison. Ken, do you support a proposed constitutional amendment to create a progressive income tax structure?
Absolutely not. And the reason why, using the last 21 years of my professional experience in doing tax returns, not only for individuals, but for businesses alike, I can tell you firsthand the impact that it's having on our communities. You know, I should say, when they decide to implement a progressive tax structure, really what's going to end up happening is a continual erosion of our tax base. And what that means is that as people decide to out-migrate, we're going to be left with what's remaining. And as long as we continue to have a bloated government, there is absolutely no reason to trust what's going down on in Springfield. I can promise you that. But before, you know, if that should happen, and if we're going to go down that direction, then I think we need to take a look at who those millionaires and billionaires are. And I would ask J.B. Pritzker to go ahead and publish his tax returns for public comment and public review. So this way we can see where his allocation apportionment is. Because that's how most people that make any kind of wealth, that's how they deviate from paying the Illinois tax.
And finally, Democrat Karla Bailey-Smith.
As I said in my opening, I do support the fair tax. It gets us closer to a balanced budget, and actually it would help small businesses because the fair tax only raises taxes on those people who have a net profit of $250,000 or more. Most small businesses don't reach that. Our small family farms don't reach that either. Illinois is one of only a few states that have a regressive tax rather than a progressive tax that mirrors the tax brackets we use for our federal taxes. Because the fair tax only raises taxes on people making $250,000 or more, most people will see their taxes go down. This is going to help the middle class. This is not going to hurt the middle class. And the additional funding for education will allow for property tax relief, which will also help our middle class and working class families. The state should bear more of the cost for our public education, not our homeowners.
The pandemic has had far-reaching negative effects on the small business climate, service sector workers, and many other parts of society. What should state lawmakers do to cushion the current pressure under which people live? I'll note that there will be another question about recovery, so you don't need to front-load your answer to that area just yet. And we'll start with Libertarian Ken Allison.
Can you just go ahead and repeat that question real quick, please?
Oh, sure.
Thank you.
The pandemic has had far-reaching negative effects on the small business climate, service sector workers, and many other parts of society. What should state lawmakers do to cushion the current pressure under which people live?
I can tell you right now, I think our state lawmakers should do something. I think at the start of this, back in January, February, March timeframe, I've seen very little action at all out of the General Assembly relative to what's going on with the pandemic and COVID. Our small businesses are being crushed at levels that most people just don't realize and just don't want to hear. And the reality is this all could have been prevented. They could have been transparent. They could have deviated. They could have provided that information down to the local levels and let the local leaders make those decisions, make what's best for our communities. So this way, people can go through their normal course of action and deal with things based on how they are seeing the world. But at the end of the day, we have a governor that's acting unilaterally, really without challenge.
We move next to Democrat Karla Bailey-Smith.
Many of our small businesses were left out of the PPP loan programs, and the federal money that was later used for grants came too late to save some of our beloved small businesses. We can continue to prioritize loans and grants to keep our small businesses open, and freezing rent and mortgages for them can make staying open possible. The General Assembly should propose TIFs that are specifically for small businesses, and we can prioritize this in the future. We're giving away too many tax revenue dollars to large corporations that could afford to pay it, and they don't contribute to keeping money in our community the way that small businesses do. And I agree that the General Assembly should have been meeting earlier this year to help keep our small businesses open.
We'll also do a full 90-second question on what state lawmakers need to do in the recovery phase down the line, more long-term, once a vaccine becomes available. And we'll start this time with Democrat Karla. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah.
Keith hasn't answered.
Yeah, I'm
this
sorry.
question.
I got. Oh my gosh, that doesn't make any sense. I apologize. We'll move next to Republican Keith Sommer.
Thank you. It's interesting that both of my candidate colleagues talked about the lack of action by the legislature. That is true. When the legislature terminated its business, I believe on Friday, March the 5th, the governor called a meeting and asked legislators to attend for information about what was ahead. I thought I better run there quickly because of the 177 legislators, seats might go be a premium. I was disappointed to see that only 20 of us showed up. But after that, as my other candidates have said, the governor has issued one-man rule. He has not involved the legislature. Even when we returned to Springfield the very end of May to finish what business we could and pass a budget, the governor would not consider requests by myself on the House floor to address the issue of the emergency days of 30 days had passed, and it's time for the legislature to act and be involved. That was brushed aside. Before we move forward, the legislature must be part of the government. We are an equal branch. We cannot proceed in the next spring session or even in the veto session without the governor recognizing that we have as much a role in this as he does.
We'll now move to a full 90-second question on what the state and lawmakers need to do in the recovery phase down the line when a vaccine becomes available. And we'll start this question with Democrat Karla Bailey-Smith.
So one of the keys to our long-term recovery, first and foremost, we all need to wear masks when we're near each other, because before a vaccine is available, our economy isn't even going to start to recover until our numbers start to go down. One of the most important keys to long-term investment is to get the Clean Energy Jobs Act passed in Springfield, so that as our fossil fuel plants are closing down, that we are retraining workers and investing in companies like Rivian, investing in more wind and solar energy in central Illinois. And also, we want to make sure that we're not diverting funds from the Rebuild Illinois plan, because that is a robust stimulus package that's going to keep money in the pockets of workers and in our local economies.
We move next to Republican Keith Sommer on long-term recovery plans.
First of all, Carla's right. We have to make sure that people remain safe and healthy. The pandemic is real, and we cannot move forward without continuing to recognize that. The state monies that are channeled, or the federal monies channeled through state government, have to be passed on to our downstate communities. We have the municipal league and all our municipalities asking for the monies that the federal government has already given to the state, but only spent, only distributed in Chicago and a few of the larger communities. Why are we not doing so in all our municipalities in Illinois? The federal government has that obligation to promise those things. But on the other hand, I don't feel that the federal government should fiscally bail out irresponsible spending in government. Not all our municipalities are in financial in dire straits financially. McLean County, Bloomington, Morton. What I find is those communities that have managed their money appropriately in the past will be fine in the future. It seems like the task ahead of us is trying to address the issues that our larger communities have.
And Libertarian Ken Allison.
Yep. I just want to comment a couple things. First off, everybody knows already that we need to wear masks. I think it's about high time that we stop virtue signaling and stop shaming people into doing things that we already know what we're supposed to be doing. As far as I'm aware, our numbers are going down. Even here in McLean County, they're starting to go down. That's just published as of yesterday. You know, Keith made a great point about, federal dollars getting down to the local levels. The unfortunate part is that the state of Illinois decided to create more regulation and create more rules. East Peoria as a community should have received $1 million in COVID relief. But because of regulation, they only really have access to $50,000. There was an article not that long ago about that. So, yes, we want to stop spending. Keith Sommer's been in office for the last 21 years. Where's his culpability and where's his accountability?
What lawmakers choose to work on and specialize is important for voters to know. For some, it's education, the environment, business growth, and economic development, among many other things. In addition to regular constituent services, any lawmaker must be good at what issues touch your heart that you want to emphasize for voters. And we'll start this question with Libertarian Ken Allison.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think first and foremost, I think we need to really take a hard look at the educational dollars that are being used to be able to provide a solid foundational education for our children. I oftentimes tell people that, if it's not good for children or moms, soccer moms or single moms, that I don't really have too much of an interest in it, because at the end of the day, that's where life starts, right? And I think from an education standpoint, we have to think a little bit more outside the box. Our educators, because I'm on the school board, I'm witnessing it firsthand. Our educators and the administrations are struggling. largely because they're having to deal with the optics of how to manage the school system and how to also get their kids back safely. We have kids that are underserviced because they don't have access to high-speed internet. That's problematic. These are things that are real easy solutions, but they just need to be addressed. But for whatever reason, we seem to lose that fidelity, largely because we don't have representation that's actually being part of the solution. Point blank.
We'll move next to Democrat Karla Bailey-Smith.
Could you repeat the question one more time, please?
Sure. What lawmakers choose to work on and specialize in is important for voters to know. So for some, it's education, the environment, business growth, economic development, or any number of other things. In addition to regular constituent services, what issues touch your heart that you believe voters need to know about?
Well, I have been an advocate and an activist for many years, and this includes, going down to Springfield and attending legislative action days, and I feel, as a resident, I feel that our representation for the last 21 years has, certainly in the 10 years that I've lived here, I don't feel like I have representation in Springfield. I don't feel like my concerns are listened to. I find it difficult to get an answer from my representative's office. So I want to be available, and I want to be active. I am active in the community and listening, and definitely families. And Sommer says that he supports adoption and family services, and yet he's voted against accommodation for pregnant workers, child care subsidies for working women. He's voted against sex education and contraception. And all of these things affect families, and I want to make a difference.
And Republican Keith Sommer.
Thank you. We all have our legislative interests beyond the major issues that we face, particularly education and budgeting and making sure that we are financially sound. As Karla just said, she has been to Springfield and actually has been in my office with a group of others from Bloomington, so I'm disappointed that she didn't think that I was receptive. There are two issues, frankly, that I have worked on extensively. As an adoptive parent, I've found that with other colleagues, that adoption processes in Illinois were abominable 15 years ago, 12 years ago. And a special committee was formed to address those issues, to clean up domestic and international adoption. Domestic adoption where anyone on the street could charge you $50,000 to get a child and have no real documentation as to where that child came from. And international processes that one person in state government could deny that adoption. The other main issue is child welfare and abuse. DCFS has a horrendous record, and every year we see the publishing of names and circumstances of over 100 children that have died. That is unacceptable. That is one of the causes I pledge to work and continue to work for.
I'm Dana Vollmer. This is 89.1 FM WGLT and WGLT.org. And I'm going to start that over again. I apologize. I'm Dana Vollmer. This is 89.1 FM WGLT and WGLT.org and 89.9 FM WCBU and WCBU.org. Thanks for listening to this forum featuring the candidates for the Illinois State House in the 88th District. They are Republican Keith Sommer, Democrat Karla Bailey-Smith, and Libertarian Ken Allison. How do you think the public pension underfunding issue should be addressed? What's the way forward?
That's
and
different.
So that is a little bit different here. So I am going to start you over there, Karla. I apologize. And we are good to go now.
Well, the pension problem, unfortunately, goes back many years when the state of Illinois was not making their full pension payments. So we're left with a situation of trying to recover essentially from the sins of our fathers. And so it's complex. And we want to make sure that the people who are currently receiving pensions, that we meet those obligations. I am certainly open to looking at solutions for future pension recipients.
We will move next to Republican Keith Sommer. Representative Sommer, how do you think the public pension underfunding issue should be addressed?
Well, first of all, we have to address it. The governor's been in office for 2 years, and there hasn't been much of a word about it. It's high time we did that. Karla's correct. Back in 1979, our pensions were pretty well funded, back in maybe the 98th percentile. But since then, the legislature has made too many promises and enhancements without revenue availability. 9/11 happened. Illinois, which at that time, our state investments were stronger in equities than any other state, and we lost more than any other state. I propose, perhaps to get this ball moving, that we cap all appropriations and stop new spending until these issues are addressed in a meaningful way. Just don't go forward with anything else until we address this issue. I would ask the Legislative Commission on Government Forecasting and Accountability to authorize a financial study to investigate how switching new employees to a defined contribution retirement plan would work financially. The private sector has done that. The public sector needs to look at it. Reamortization that's proposed, I think, is a Band-Aid and just postpones the day of reckoning.
And Libertarian Ken Allison.
Yep, I think the answer is very straightforward and very swift. We already have a system in the university retirement system that's already a defined contribution plan. It shouldn't be that hard for us to use that as a model for the rest of our public pension systems. And I agree with Karla. Yes, anybody that wants a pension, that's paid into the pension, should absolutely be able to have the choice. You know, I spent 27 and a half years in the military. I have a defined benefit plan, right? But the DOD just changed not that long ago to a defined contribution plan. If the state of Illinois can't replicate it, that seems silly. And for Keith to say he's going to go down there and tell, the General Assembly that maybe we should now switch, why hasn't that already been brought up? Especially since the university retirement system is already an adequate model. The answer is simple. Every new hire that comes on board needs to be enrolled into a defined contribution plan. Stat.
There remains a structural deficit baked into the state obligations on pensions, but also Medicaid, K-12 education, and other mandated or highly desirable spending. A number of budgetary think tanks have said Illinois can't just cut its way to a balanced budget. So how do you think the state should fix the deficit? And we'll start this question with Republican Keith Sommer.
The state needs to cut while we only have certain funds available. We must live within our means. But we also must embrace business. We must encourage business to grow. This state could today make an about face and say, we're going to help. We're not going to be in the way of business. We're going to offer suggestions where you can grow. We want to help business. We need to retain and assist our local businesses first. Sometimes we see large companies come from other states, and the first thing Springfield does is, hey, here's a lot of money. What about the local guy? We need to make Illinois a destination state where people want to come instead of leave. Stop laws that limit opportunity. If we grow our economy, we grow employees, we grow revenue for individuals and companies, and we grow revenue for the state. That's the answer, not more taxes.
Libertarian Ken Allison.
Can you repeat the question one more time, please?
Sure.
Thank you.
There remains a structural deficit baked into the state obligations not just on pension, but Medicaid, K through 12 education, and other mandated or highly desirable spending. A number of budgetary think tanks have said Illinois cannot just cut its way to a balanced budget. How do you think the state should fix the deficit?
Absolutely. I think, and I will agree with Keith on this and the fact that Illinois needs to do a better job about doing smart deregulation, and also at the same time cutting unnecessary programs, as in the FOID. The FOID program costs the state of Illinois a pretty penny, and right now we have a lot of folks that are having their Second Amendment rights being denied or delayed, and if it's delayed, that means it is denied. And I think at the end of the day, we need to take a hard look at where those dollars are going, and make some smart cuts. As far as deregulation, we don't really need to look too much further than what we've done with the cannabis industry, right? And I know cannabis isn't necessarily a popular thing. It's, kind of hit or miss. But the reality is that we could really have taken a large step to create an additional amount of tax revenue to be able to help specifically with paying down our deficit. But no, we chose to be more regulative. And again, going back to, Keith likes to speak about, the General Assembly as if that's not him. He's been in that office for 21 years. 21 years. That's a long time to be continuing to say the same thing. This happened under his watch.
And Democrat Karla Bailey-Smith.
Well, the first step to fixing the deficit is to pass the fair tax and to ask people who earn in profit more than $250,000 a year to pay their fair share. That is not an outrageous thing to ask, and we do that at the federal government level. Many other states do it. We can do it too. The next thing is to continue to invest in new businesses, and not just recreational marijuana, but right here in McLean and Tazewell County, we should be investing in industrial hemp. That is a good cash crop, and we already have a company called Natural Fiber Welding that could be using industrial hemp right here in central Illinois. And I'll go back to my proposal about TIFs for small businesses. Let's give small businesses tax incentives for the first 5 years of their business, because small businesses make it or fail within 5 years. And if they make it after 5 years, then they can start paying appropriate business taxes.
I'd like to ask a follow-up question here because we had two candidates mention the state's legal cannabis program. We will start with Representative Sommer and go back through that way. Because this is a follow-up, it will be a 60-second answer. And I'm just looking for suggestions on reforms to Illinois' legal cannabis program.
Well, we're just gotten out of the starting blocks, actually. And I believe that the opportunity for those to invest in that business have been challenged a bit by what results have come about giving certain individuals access to that business. The minority community has, in many cases, been left out. They were actually impetus in the legislation itself, and were promised by the governor to have certain involvement. So I think the governor is re-looking at how the business operates, and we'll see what comes forward.
Libertarian Ken Allison, suggestions for reforms to Illinois' legal cannabis program.
Yep, a couple things on that. First and foremost, when we talk about corruption and self-dealing, I don't think we need to dive too deep into the cannabis world to see exactly what's happened. Those programs were there to support disenfranchised individuals that had paid their debt to society, and we failed them miserably, without exception. And back to something that Karla mentioned about the fair tax. The fair tax is anything but fair. It's a morality tax. And what happens when they are gone? Who are we going to tax after that? When you erode the tax base, rich people leave. They stop investing in our communities. They stop making businesses. People lose jobs. And the next thing you know is that you've got the poorest of the poor living in the streets and having to pay for the burdens of the state of which they have no control over their spending.
And Democrat Karla Bailey-Smith.
My first concern about the marijuana revenue is where is it going? Because my understanding was that it was going to go to help fund education, and I'm very interested once again to follow the money and find out where is that going. And I agree with my colleagues. My understanding of the initial legalization legislation for recreational marijuana was that it was supposed to be in our communities, in our disenfranchised communities, and in a way providing reparations to people who were most harmed by incarceration over marijuana offenses. And I have not seen that. I certainly have not seen that locally.
You're listening to an 88th District State House Candidate Forum. This is 89.1 FM WGLT and WGLT.org, and 89.9 FM WCBU and WCBU.org. I'm Dina Vollmer. Is the state spending money on the right things? What do you want to see more or less of in spending? And we will start this question with Libertarian Ken Allison.
I think, honestly, the truth of the matter, when we are running our state the way we are right now, I think it's ludicrous to talk about adding additional programs for spending. There are probably areas that we need to address, but I think at the end of the day, we really need to take a hard look line by line to see where the dollars are flowing, what's coming in, what's going out, what programs are working, what programs are failing. And the ones that are failing, then we need to revisit those and maybe have a hard decision to say, you know what, maybe we shouldn't be spending our tax dollars there. Because if we did that at the onset, we wouldn't be asking people to have the fair tax. And again, it's not that they're asking, they're telling us. And in fact, as of yesterday, they're not just telling us that if we don't pass it, that they're going to pass a unilateral increase on our income taxes. And the reason why they don't do that is because it's just not popular. There's enough people in the General Assembly that are career politicians that have been in office for 21 years or less, and they have to protect their seat.
We'll move next to Democrat Karla Bailey-Smith. Again, the question is the state spending money on the right things, and what do you want to see more or less spending on?
I don't have a good answer for that at this time, because I'm not in Springfield. I can't see the books. I want to see the books. I want to be able to follow the money and find out what we're spending money on that we perhaps shouldn't be spending money on. And the first thing that comes to mind, honestly, even though I'm running for this seat, is our legislators and our government in Springfield. How much money are we spending for that government entity itself, and for the people holding those offices, and for their pensions and their benefits? What are we spending on that? I'm very curious about that.
And Republican Keith Sommer.
I heard the comment that we should probably review all our spending, and that's true. And nothing should be sacrosanct other than the basics of education and public safety and health. We need to review all our spending, agency by agency, and if the expenditure is not appropriate, let's remove them. We need to do away with school mandates. What do we hear constantly from our K through 12 schools? And Ken sees this. Mandate after mandate after mandate comes down from Springfield with no way to fund it. And not only costs money, but it costs time with the administration of our schools. It's totally inappropriate. We're not talking about the right things. We're just talking about too much spending. If we limited the spending, maybe those right things would be more obvious. I voted against bloated budgets. I will continue to do so. When you had a budget that was just passed by Speaker Madigan, $5 billion out of balance, and they're trying to beg the federal government for the money, we can't continue that route. And all the fair tax and other taxes do is increase the cost to the taxpayer. More taxes, more taxes, more taxes. That's not the answer.
And Libertarian Ken Allison.
Can you repeat the question one more time? I'm sorry.
Oh, no, that's fine.
Thanks.
Scroll back to it quickly here. Is the state spending money on the right things? What do you want to see more or less spending on?
Oh, I'm sorry. I think I already answered. I was first in the line there.
Oh, gosh.
No,
I'm
that's okay.
sorry. How did I get... Yeah,
No, it's
that
okay.
makes sense.
I'll answer it again.
I scrolled down and messed myself up here.
I'll gladly answer it again. if you want.
Yes, we will do a follow-up question.
Fantastic.
And this time, it looks like we'll be starting with Karla Bailey-Smith. So the follow-up question, again, 60 seconds for follow-ups, is... I'm sorry, let me start again here. Illinois is a high property tax state and a middle-of-the-road income tax state. What's the appropriate mix of property tax and income tax, and how should Illinois get there?
Well, I honestly wasn't aware that Illinois is considered a high property tax. I have heard people complain about the fact that the property taxes keep going up in order to fund the schools. And I hope we're able to pass the fair tax so that we can relieve that property tax burden on schools. And with regards to income tax, I actually just looked this up last night. Yeah, we're about number 9 or 10 in the country for income tax. And I'm going to make one more pitch here for the fair tax. If we can ask our people who earn $250,000 or more to pay a little bit more, then those of us in the middle class and the working class can get some income tax relief.
Republican Keith Sommer.
From the question, I get the sense that, well, we have a choice of higher property tax or higher income tax. How about neither? Neither one is good. The first thing families do is economize. If we only have so much money, we only do so many things and buy the things we can afford. If we want more revenue, we maybe get a second job, or we get a better education and get a better job. One thing about the property tax versus the income tax, I was at a meeting in Olympia School District a number of years ago, a large meeting. The individuals were debating whether they should have a property tax increase for their school. Then someone said, how about an income tax? And it was resoundingly rejected by the people because they knew that an income tax, that money goes to Springfield, and who knows where it goes from there. It likely won't come back. At least in the property tax, it goes to the county level and is distributed back to you.
And Libertarian Ken Allison.
Yep, I'm going to one more time pitch to not vote for the fair tax amendment, because it's anything but fair. And asking people just because they make $250,000 or more a year to pay more is not fair. It's targeted. When those people leave, who's going to remain? And people have to think not just this year, but they need to think over the long run, the 5, the 10, the 15, the 20-year run, and think about what that progressive tax structure is going to do. As far as whether or not income tax or property taxes, I think we need to take a hard look at also those local communities. For the same house that I own in Washington, Illinois, that house would probably cost me $800 or $900 a year in Denver, Colorado. Why is that? People need to ask that question, because there are other states doing it right. We just need to get out of our own way and maybe talk to some of those other states, see what works. The problem is that no one wants to leave Illinois to go ask those hard questions.
This is WGLT and WCBU election coverage. I'm Dana Vollmer. This is a candidate forum with Republican State Representative Keith Sommer and challengers Democrat Karla Bailey-Smith and Libertarian Ken Allison. Representative Sommer will start with the answers on this question. The first question, where does the state do well in facilitating economic development, and what does it lack? What should lawmakers do to address this?
Repeat that question, please.
Oh, sure. So let me go back. Where does the state do well in facilitating economic development? What does it lack? And what should lawmakers do to address this?
Well, I think the economic development proposals that come through the Department of Economic Opportunity are too often grant programs that are specifically focused on certain communities. Communities like McLean County have a great story to tell. We have great business successes and advantageous infrastructure and a dynamic workforce. What we need from the state, assistance in the state, is leveraging the programs that the state has that are economical and that actually do bring results. We shouldn't fund competitors to already existing local businesses. We've seen that locally. Certainly we must help communities invest in infrastructure. Retain and assist local business first. Less red tape, lower state taxes. And as I'd said before, help business. Don't stand in the way. Give a helping hand. Don't tell people they can't do something. Tell them they can and offer suggestions as how they may.
We'll move next to Libertarian Ken Allison. Again, the question is, where does the state do well in facilitating economic development? What does it lack? And what should lawmakers do to address it?
I don't think the state does anything remotely helpful at all to the small business community. I think this is an important question to ask. I think we need to ask, where do those dollars actually go? Who actually benefits? Who are getting those BIG grants that are being doled out right now? Where did that come from? Where did those dollars come from? Who's benefiting? I can tell you right now, I own 5 small businesses. Well, 4. One of them I'm trying to get up off the ground since COVID started. But I don't need the government's help. I just need them to stay out of my way. Because if I can do what I need to do to be able to make sure that my people make the money that they need to make to be able to survive, I mean, I support 30 families. I've got 30 employees across 4 different businesses. I know what needs to happen. The state needs to stay out of the way. Give the power and the money down to local communities so this way they can make the most adequate decisions that they see fit. I spent 27.5 years in the military. It's called decentralized execution. You know, you don't have somebody that's at this level, the super high level, the state level, making decisions for the guys that are down on the front lines.
And Democrat Karla Bailey-Smith.
One thing that that I would like to do for our communities is make sure that that the grants that are available for infrastructure like broadband and community development projects like addressing the food desert on the west side of Bloomington, that I will make sure that our communities know that these grants are available. We do have pockets where people don't have broadband, and they should. And there has been federal money passed down to the state, but our local people need to be aware of that available grant money. And also, you know, addressing the food desert and the business flight from the west side of Bloomington. We could have fixed that 10 years ago if we had had someone advocating for the people of our community. So that's something that I think we could do better.
The long-running federal corruption probe into Commonwealth Edison lobbying and state lawmakers continues. What ethics and transparency measures do you believe should be enacted to cover the General Assembly and statewide elected officials? We'll start this question with Libertarian Ken Allison.
It's an easy question. I think the first thing we do is we need a mandate that every single elected official, all the way from the governor all the way down to the lowest community level, needs to provide the last 5 to 10 years worth of tax returns so that the regular public, so the average person, could have comments and thought about behind how they make their money. I think when we look at what's going on with Michael Madigan, knowing that he's been in office for 49 years, I'm 48 years old. He's been in office 1 year longer than I've been alive. Keith Sommer's been in office for 21 years too, as well, right? So at what point do we not start, at what point do we start holding the entire General Assembly culpable and accountable for the massive level of corruption and self-dealing that's been going on? Because I guarantee it, if we start asking for tax returns, people are going to start getting upset. It's high time. Transparency matters.
Democrat Karla Bailey-Smith.
Dana, could you repeat the question, please?
Absolutely. The long-running federal corruption probe into Commonwealth Edison lobbying and state lawmakers continues. What ethics and transparency measures do you believe should be enacted to cover the General Assembly and statewide elected officials?
There are a number of ethics reform proposals on the table now, and I think if those get addressed and passed, that will help a lot. And I'm going to agree with Ken on this one. I want to follow the money. I've said that several times, and I'll say it again. We need to know who's profiting off of these deals. And I wouldn't mind showing my tax returns. That would show everybody that I'm a regular working class person.
And Republican Keith Sommer.
There's certainly a lot of ethics reforms we can make. I think the first one we start with is leader term limits. Speaker Madigan's been in that chair, 40 plus years. He actually runs the legislature. Leader term limits should be 10 years or less. Some caucuses have those rules in place. Others have them in place and then ignore them. Power corrupts. And absolute power corrupts absolutely. We cannot continue to afford the state being run in this manner. We need stronger regulation also of our lobbying activity with greater disclosure there. When you talk about ComEd and that legislation that passed, people say you could smell the money in the Capitol. The money distributed through lobbyists. Every lobbyist was hired to put an arm on somebody. Cooling off period. Too often we have legislators who become lobbyists. They can do it the next day. It's untoward and shouldn't happen. There's a proposal now to cut it to say wait a year. I say wait 2 years, which is a legislative term of the House. That'd be a good start.
And that response brings us to the end of the question period of the forum and on to the 2-minute closing statements. It's Democrat Karla Bailey-Smith's turn to start.
One question earlier that really threw me was, what do I care most about? What do I want to, pour my heart into in Springfield? And I fumbled because honestly, there's about 20 or 30 different things. But one thing that's at the top for me is workers' rights. Making sure that our frontline workers are paid a living wage. Making sure that our unions are protected, our union jobs are protected. They set standards in our community, and I want to make sure that we protect our project labor agreements. Also, with regards to being connected to the community, a few weeks into the shutdown, I started doing weekly town halls, addressing different issues and concerns, talking about reasons why we should vote, why voting matters, and that your vote can make a difference. If you cast your vote for me, I will do my best to make a difference in your life, because I will continue to do town halls in person and on Zoom so we can include as many people as possible in the conversation. I will listen to your concerns and be an active problem solver.
We move next to Republican Keith Sommer. Your turn for 2-minute closing remarks.
Thank you, Dana, for this opportunity, and thank you to those who will be listening to this program in the future. I believe that my priorities are a reflection of the priorities of my district. Financial stability, placing a high value on providing quality education for our children, and a desire for smaller government. I'm proud to be a co-sponsor of comprehensive ethics reform, as corruption is the one problem in Springfield that magnifies all the other hurdles that our state faces. Illinois suffers from too much power in the hands of too few individuals. I rejected the Madigan-Beck bill that tacked $5 billion of new debt onto our financial situation. I voted against putting the new tax on the ballot, and I'm going to vote against it again on November 3rd. I ask for your support and vote to continue representing you, the good, hardworking people of McLean County in central Illinois. Many organizations have recognized my good work and endorsed me, including the Illinois and McLean County Chambers of Commerce, as well as the Sheriffs of Illinois and the Illinois Associated Builders and Contractors, and many more. In addition, I have once again been recognized as a friend of agriculture and a champion of free enterprise. When the election is over and the dust settles, let the victors be not prideful nor boastful, but humble and understanding of the responsibilities bestowed upon them. I am Keith Sommer, and I again ask for your vote.
And finally, Libertarian Ken Allison.
Thank you, Dana, for the opportunity, and I also want to thank the fellow candidates for their time out of their schedule to come down here and actually talk. You know, the three pillars of really why I'm running is about trust and transparency through service. You know, I spent my entire adult life serving this country, this state, as well as the good people of McLean and Tazewell County and various other counties. And, you know, I think the one thing that's going to win the day is the one candidate that's willing to stand up and fight for our people, as well as whatever their voices may be. For me, I think of myself as a conservative. And I look at that not from the perspective of Republican, Democrat, and again, nothing against the other candidates, but I think we have to look more wholeheartedly at what those parties represent. The Democrat Party is leaning very, very far to the left and is being pulled in a direction that none of us really want, and that's socialism. The Republican Party, unfortunately, it doesn't have an answer for that. They're not willing to stand up and say, you know what, I'm not going to allow that to happen on my watch. When it comes to transparency, I talked a little bit at the very beginning about who I am, you know, and that encompasses the last 30 years. And the reason why I'm running is because no one has moved the needle. Neither one of these parties have moved the needle, not in any measurable way. When I was 5 years old, I was nearly abducted. By the time I was 6 years old, I was sexually molested by somebody outside the household. By the time I was 11, I witnessed my mother being raped. If you don't think for a moment that I'm not a fighter, you need to think again. And I'm willing to make sure that the people of the 88th District are well protected. That's a hill that I'm willing to die on. If you want to vote for transparency, you want to vote for reform, vote for Ken Allison.